Content warning. The Matherson Marriage contains unhealthy relationship dynamics and fictional domestic abuse. If you are in a real-life Matherson marriage, please reach out to the appropriate authorities for help. Resources you may find helpful include the Pixel Project's Domestic Violence Resource page and UN Women's International Helplines list. Resources will be linked in the video description for accessibility. Hi, I'm Morgan, and today I will be reading from The Matherson Marriage by Ruby M. Ayres. Chapter 19. Joyce knocked on Pansy's door as she was dressing for dinner that evening. "Is Buster with you?" she asked. "Buster?" Pansy came to the door in surprise. "No, I left him in the garden half an hour ago. I've looked there, but I can't find him. We're going to have a storm, and I know he's afraid of thunder." "I expect he's in the yard with Gates," Pansy said. She turned back to the dressing table as the first peal of thunder came. "Bring him in quickly, Joyce," she called. "It's going to rain hard." She finished dressing hurriedly and went downstairs. The front door was open, and the leaves in the garden were stirring with faint agitation, heralding the storm. Violet came running downstairs. "Where's Buster? I know he hates thunder. He'll be so scared." "Joyce has gone to fetch him in," Pansy answered. They stood together at the open door, watching the rain that had begun to fall. Violet slipped an arm through her sister's. "I wonder if you know how ill you look, Pansy," she said suddenly. "Ill?" Pansy flushed vividly. "How absurd." "It's not absurd, and I'm not the only one that's noticed it," Violet insisted. "I asked Basil yesterday if he couldn't see it, and even he said yes, he could. Pansy," her voice quivered, "you would tell me if there was anything the matter, wouldn't you? You know how fond I am of you. I'd do anything for you." Pansy drew away. "There isn't anything," she said fretfully. "What in the world do you imagine could be the matter?" "I don't know, but it's in the air. It has been ever since you came home from London. First it was Lynn, and now you looking so ill. I wonder what the third thing will be." Pansy gave a sudden exclamation. "Why, look at Joyce!" Joyce was running across the lawn towards them through the pouring rain. "She'll get drenched to the skin," Violet said in concern. "How silly of her not to have put on a coat." There was a second silence. Then Pansy said sharply, She hasn't got Buster with her." She ran down the steps. "Joyce? Where's Buster?" Joyce waved her back. Go in, she called. She joined them, breathless and panting. The rain was running from her hair and dress in little rivulets. "Buster isn't in the yard," she said. "Gates hasn't seen him all day, and Smale says he hasn't been in the kitchen either. Where did you say you left him, Pansy?" "In the garden. He'd got his green cart and the horse. They're there now. I saw them near the gate." The three girls looked at one another, and Joy said, with an effort, I dare say he's hiding. I'll run upstairs and see." "He wouldn't hide with this storm going on," Pansy said quickly. "He'd be too frightened." But she went back into the hall and called agitatedly, "Buster? Where are you, darling?" But there was no answer. "He must be somewhere about," Joy said, with a calmness she was far from feeling. "I'll search upstairs, and you look in all the rooms down here. I wonder where Mr. Matherson is." It was Violet who answered. "He's gone over to Shorley. Don't you remember, Pansy? He said at tea time he was driving over, and might not be back till late." Pansy did not answer. She hunted the dining room and the drawing room, and even the library, a room which Buster disliked so heartily because it was used by his father, that he never entered it if it could be avoided, but there was no sign of him. Joyce came running down again. "He's not upstairs." And then the fear that each of them knew and had tried to disguise broke in a little anguished cry from Pansy's white lips. "Something must have happened to him." The storm was at its height now. The rain was pouring down, and there seemed to be hardly an interval between the flashes of lightning and the peals of thunder. Joyce flew to the servants. "We can't find Buster. Has anyone seen him? He can't be out in this awful storm." Gates had come up from the garage. He was white and scared. "I see him go out of the garden gate, miss, not an hour ago," he said in distress. "I called out to him, but he didn't seem to hear. Then something happened to put it out of my mind." Perhaps he's in one of the cottages," Violet suggested. She had followed Joyce. "I'll put on my hat and coat and go down the village. I don't care about the storm. I shan't hurt." "Where's Pansy? Don't let her go," Joyce said quickly. But Pansy had already gone, hatless as she was, into the pouring rain. She ran hither and thither in the garden, calling frantically to Buster. Darling! Where are you?" The thunder clouds had made it very dark, and the rain was streaming down. It's a punishment. My punishment, she told herself in despair. I deserve to lose him. He's too good for me. She searched every corner of the gardens before she went back to the house. The rain was dripping from her clothes, and her hair was wringing wet. Violet had just come back from the village. She shook her head in reply to Pansy's anguished question. He isn't there. I went to every house. No one has seen him. But Joyce is still searching. She clasped her hands. Oh, if only Basil were here, or someone. Pansy made no answer. Every nerve in her body was strained to snapping point. Buster! Buster! She would die if she did not find him. She turned to the door again, but Violet caught her. You're wet through. Don't go, Pansy. But she might as well not have spoken. Pansy wrenched herself free. Violet was crying outright. She felt their helplessness to be the worst thing of all. If there were only someone to give them a lead, to tell them what to do. She thought suddenly of Lynn. He would come if he knew. She flew to the telephone. She could hardly wait while her call was answered. Is that Chiswell's? Is that you? Lynn? Heavens! How slow you are. You're not Mr. Ramsden. Well, I want him. Is he in? Fetch him then. Quick! Tell him, Miss Tremaine. Tell him to come at once. That it's urgent. Oh, hurry, hurry. But it seemed a lifetime before she heard Lynn's voice. It's Violet. Lynn, we want you. Oh, come quickly, come at once. We're in such dreadful trouble. It was only afterwards that she remembered his first sharp question. What is it? Is it Pansy? But at the time it passed her by. We've lost Buster. He's out in the storm. Pansy's half mad. Basil, no, he's away. Oh, Lynn, do come. She was sobbing as she hung up the receiver. She turned to find Joyce standing beside her. Who are you talking to? She asked quickly. Mr. Matherson? No, Lynn Ramsden. I asked him to come. We want a man here to help us. He won't come, Joyce said positively. Violet rounded on her passionately. He will. He says he will. She went to the open front door. The rain was still teeming down, splashing up from the soaked paths and myriads of minute fountains. There was no sign of Pansy, and the garden looked dark and gloomy. If anything has happened to him, Pansy will die, Joyce said. Gates came across the lawn to them, the rain dripping from his cap. I've been over every inch of the ground, miss. There's no sign of him, only his little Olsen cart standing by the gate. He was almost in tears. If only Basil was at home, Violet wailed. Joyce turned away. He'd only make things worse, she said bluntly. She went out again and wandered helplessly about, stopping every now and then to call Buster, believing once that she heard his voice reply, and running wildly in the direction from which the sound had seemed to come. But there was nothing. It was 20 minutes before Lynn's car turned in at the drive gate, and Violet ran out into the rain to meet him. Is he found? He was out of the seat as he asked. No, we've hunted everywhere. And Pansy? I don't know. She went out in this rain. I couldn't stop her. Oh, Lynn, where are you going? For you turned away already. He flung her an answer over his shoulder. To find Buster. He was gone before she could speak, leaving his car in the drive. Violet wiped her eyes. A faint sense of comfort stole into her heart. He'll find him, if anyone can, she told herself. He'll find him if he's to be found. Oh, Buster, darling! Matherson came home about 10. The rain and sudden chilliness had made him irritable, and it did not improve matters when he heard what had happened. He looked at his wife with condemning eyes. You've yourself to thank for this, and the way you've spoiled him. He doesn't know what it means to do as he's told. Violet flew to her sister's defense. Don't be such a brute, Basil. She's suffering enough. You might be kind. We've been out since 7, hunting everywhere. It's your turn to help now. She put her arm round Pansy, who sat white-faced and hopeless. She was shivering from head to foot, and her hands were like ice. She had been out in the rain for 2 hours, and had only come home when the vain hope that she might find Buster had returned. Violet had tried to make her change her wet clothes, but she would not listen. Leave me alone, only leave me alone, she said. In her heart, she was sure Buster was dead. Matherson asked a question. What's Ramsden's car doing in the drive? I sent for him, Violet said. We had to have some man to help us. He's out with Gates, searching the fields and woods. Matherson took off his overcoat. Is there any dinner to be had? He asked. I came home without any. Dinner? Violet's face flushed. Don't you realize what's happened? She demanded. Buster's been missing since before 7, and it's nearly 11 now. Pansy rose to her feet. She looked at her husband with burning eyes. I suppose, is it anything you've done to him? She asked in a terrible voice. I? Good Lord, you must be mad. I haven't seen the boy since this morning. A nice thing to ask a man, I must say. No, you can look for the trouble nearer home. Pansy dropped back to her chair. "I will kill myself if Buster doesn't come back," she said, and the quietness of her voice was a tragedy. Matherson shrugged his shoulders uneasily. He picked up his overcoat. "It's raining like the devil," he said, "but I suppose I must go out and see what can be done." Pansy looked at her sister. "If Buster's dead," she said again, "I will kill myself." Violet burst into tears. "He isn't dead, darling. I'm sure he isn't," she sobbed. "Don't say such dreadful things, Pansy. Don't say them." Pansy sat staring before her. "He's so terrified of thunder." Her white lips quivered, but her eyes were dry, while over and over in her mind the same words revolved ceaselessly. "It's my punishment, my punishment. I shall never see him again." The night wore away. 11, 12, she heard the church clock in the far distance strike each hour, and still there was no news. "He'll be found soon," Joyce urged again and again. "All the village is out looking for him. He must be found soon." Pansy made no answer. She kept her eyes fixed on the open front door, where the headlights of Lynn's car split the somber darkness. 1 o'clock. 2. Violet put her arms round her sister. "Come upstairs now. Dear, it's no use waiting. I'll tell you the minute we hear anything, I promise." Pansy looked at her, and the anguish of her eyes was like a living thing. "You mean, you think he's dead?" she asked. No! Matherson came back presently. His face was pale. "My own belief is that the boy's been kidnapped," he said angrily. "I shall send to Scotland Yard. He can't be anywhere round here, or we're bound to have found him by this time. Every man and woman for miles round is out helping in the search." His voice sounded as if he were pleased. He liked to feel that his son was such a popular favorite. The storm had cleared away, though the rain was still falling, and out in the garden a bird twittered drowsily. "It's getting light," Violet whispered. She and Joyce were standing together at the open door, holding hands. "Yes. Do you think—" Violet began and stopped. She could not ask the question which was in both their minds. Matherson went to Pansy. "Go to bed, my dear girl," he said kindly. "You're wearing yourself out. There's nothing you can do. We're doing everything in our power." But her eyes were blank, and she made no answer. And he said again, more impatiently, "If you'd only try and rest." She seemed to hear that, and her white face was stained with dull color. "Rest?" She almost laughed. "Do you think I shall ever be able to rest again?" He shrugged his shoulders. "You do exaggerate so," he complained. Down at the end of the winding drive, the light of a lamp twinkled suddenly. Pansy's strained eyes saw it before any of them, and she gave a little cry. "They're coming back! Perhaps they found him!" Her voice was a shaken whisper. Violet caught her hand. "Let me go. Don't you go, Pansy. Let me go." She pushed her sister towards Matherson. "Don't let her come, Basil." She ran down the drive towards the twinkling light, her heart sick with dread at what she might hear. But there was nothing. Only white, sad faces greeted her. "No, there's no news." They went back to the house. "It's nothing. They've come to see if we'd heard anything," Matherson told his wife. 3 o'clock. 4. Violet was sitting on the bottom stair, her hands clasped round her knees, her eyes heavy with tears and want of sleep. Joyce came from the kitchen with some steaming coffee. She took it to Pansy. "Drink it, dear. You must," she urged. No, Matherson interfered. "Don't be ungrateful. Pansy, we're all doing our best." She looked at him with dull eyes. "Anyone would think he wasn't your child," she said passionately. "You don't care." "Of course I care. But I can't see any sense in behaving in this absurd way. It's everyone's duty to keep cheerful." Pansy shuddered. "Cheerful! When at that moment Buster might be dead. It's my punishment. It's all I deserve." Over and over again the words hammered into her brain. It was light enough now to distinguish the shapes of the trees and the wide beds of flowers. "We must find him now. It's getting light," Matherson said to Joyce in an undertone. "If he's anywhere near, poor little chap." Joyce could not answer, and suddenly there was a smothered cry from Pansy. She rose to her feet, her arms outstretched gropingly, as if she were blind. "Pansy!" Matherson spoke sharply. He followed her to the door. Then he stood still, his face hardening. Lynn Ramsden was coming across the sodden lawn through the gray dawn light, a little limp bundle clasped in his arms. "Buster!" The trembling cry broke from Pansy's lips. She seemed to wake to life. She ran down the steps and across the grass to him. There was a very madness of fear and hope in her eyes. "Is he alive? Is he alive?" Lynn put the boy gently into her shaking arms, and Buster stirred and half unconsciously murmured his mother's name. "Don't Pansy burst into wild tears. Darling, my own precious boy!" She looked up at Lynn with eyes of passionate gratitude. "Oh, God bless you! God bless you for bringing him back to me!" she sobbed, and she lifted her face and kissed him in front of Matherson and all the others who had crowded down from the house. And that is the end of chapter 19 of the Matherson Marriage by Ruby M. Ayres. Thank you for listening to this chapter with me, and I hope you return soon for the next one. Have a great day!